Hello students, welcome to my channel Biology Foundation. This is part 2 of Unit 1 Life on Earth. So yesterday we discussed what were the features that distinguish or differentiate a living organism, or you can say an animate thing, from an inanimate object or a non-living thing. We discussed few characteristics where I said that living organisms show the presence of cells, and living organisms grow where this growth is basically internal and it is irreversible. Thirdly, living organisms show movement utilizing internal source of energy. Living organisms show the process of nutrition where the food that they eat is digested into simple compounds to provide energy, and this energy is utilized for various activities. And we talked about autotrophs and heterotrophs here, where plants can prepare their own food, whereas animals and human beings depend on the plants for their food. And living organisms exhibit the process of excretion. What is excretion? It is the removal of waste substances from the body. Okay, so today let's discuss some more differences between living and non living things. Okay, so first is respiration. Okay, before understanding respiration, see the time you wake up, from the time you wake up till you go back to sleep, you do various things. I mean, the moment you wake up till uh, you go back to sleep, firstly you brush your teeth. Sorry, brush your teeth. You bathe. You get ready for your school. Then you perform various activities in school. Listen to the classes, and you walk, come back to home, then again do your homework, maybe help your mom or parents in any work, again play with your friends, and then go back, have your lunch or dinner, sorry, have your dinner and go back to sleep. So basically, for performing all these activities you need energy, right? So basically the food that we eat, which is rich basically in glucose, okay, the food that you eat along with the air that we breathe in, basically oxygen that we breathe in, the cell which is present inside our body, we are multicellular organisms made up of many cells. Sorry. So basically the food that we eat along with the oxygen that we breathe in gets converted into carbon dioxide, water, and in turn gives you energy to perform various activities. So, from the time you wake up till you go back to bed, you do various kinds of activities where some activities do not need much energy. For example, if you're sitting and watching television, you don't need much energy. Unlike if you if you are going to an academy for coaching for basketball, or you have to concentrate in a class, then your brain needs lot more energy. So how is this energy being generated? The food that you eat, basically, which is rich in glucose, along with the oxygen that we breathe in, get converted into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This energy that is liberated inside the cell is utilized for various activities. Now this process is called respiration. So what is respiration? It is the process where energy is generated by oxidation of the food that you eat, or where oxygen combines with the food to give rise to carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This energy is utilized for various activities that we perform. Okay, now any living organism shows this process of respiration where the food that the organism feeds upon is oxidized in the presence of oxygen to give rise to carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And this is the carbon dioxide that we give out or breathe out. Okay, now it's very important, students, that you need to understand the difference between breathing and respiration. When I use the term breathing, it's simply where I'm telling that taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. That is called breathing, where you breathe in or you take in oxygen and give out or breathe out carbon dioxide. That process is called breathing. But when I say respiration, what does that mean? The oxygen that we are breathing in, that oxygen combines with the food that we eat to convert it into carbon dioxide, water, and energy is liberated. The energy that's liberated is utilized to perform various activities. So this is said to be respiration. Any living organism, whether it is an animal, plant, microorganism, human being, all or living organisms show the process of respiration. Okay. And if you remember yesterday, I told you about this special structure. Just like we have nose with nostrils, allowing us to breathe in and breathe out. With the help of these nostrils, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. What about plants? Do they have nostrils? No. Plants have special structures known as stomata. Okay, and these stomata are present on the, if you consider this as the leaf, it is present on the lower surface of the leaf. These stomata pores, okay, they are basically pores which are present on the lower surface of the leaf, which help in exchange of gases. So oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is liberated out. Respiration always means res- when I say respiration, it's the process where the glucose that's present in our body in the form of food gets oxidized, or with the help of oxygen gets converted into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Okay, and this energy is utilized to perform various activities. So only living organisms show this process of respiration, not the inanimate objects. Why? Basic, have you ever seen pebbles, pens, or tab, or your suitcase needing, where they show the requirement for food? No, they don't need food for their survival. They are inanimate objects and they don't need any kind of energy to perform any activity. But we, unlike human beings or living organisms, animate things, they show the process of respiration. What is respiration? It is the process where food that we eat is getting oxidized, or food in the presence of oxygen gets converted into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This carbon dioxide we breathe out, we give out, we liberate it out. This energy we are using it to perform various activities. Water, what happens to the water that is generated? It is utilized for various other reactions to happen inside our cell. Okay. Next, next difference between living and non-living organisms is response to stimulus. Okay, before we understand what it is, let's take an example. Let's assume you came back from school, you were praised by your teacher for a wonderful project that you have done. Mother felt so happy that you were appreciated by your teacher, so she made your favorite snack, that's hot plate of noodles, okay. And you were watching the television, so your mother bought hot plate of noodles. You were unaware that they were very hot, and as you were concentrating on television, you were watching your favorite show, let's consider maybe Doraemon or something. So you didn't see that the plate was very hot, and you just took the fork and put one morsel of the food in your mouth. Immediately you felt, what would you do immediately? So as soon as you know that it's very hot, immediately you remove the fork, and before placing one more uh, morsel of the noodles, you first blow and then you start eating, right? Because you now know that okay, the plate is very hot, noodles were just prepared now, and you will blow on it, because again you don't want your mouth to get hot, right? Now when I say stimulus, what does it mean? Stimulus is any change that occurs internally or externally is called as stimulus. Change in external or internal environment is called as stimulus. Okay, or let's assume your mother gave you hot cup of water. Okay, and you didn't know about it, you touched it, immediately what will be your response? You quickly withdraw your hands from the cup, right? So that's your response, right, towards the stimulus. Stimulus means any external or internal change in the external or internal environment. Response is basically the way you respond to the change. Okay, just like how this boy was blowing on his noodles before he put second bite of the noodles, or just like how you were withdrawing your hand from the cup of hot water. That's your response against the stimulus. So living organisms, they respond to changes in the external and internal environment. For example, uh, if you remember in yesterday's class, I told you that roots, they show movement towards the soil or towards Mother Earth. That is, they show gravitropic movement or gravitropism. And we know stems, they always grow towards sunlight, right? They grow towards the sunlight, and this is said to be phototropic. Another interesting example is, this is a plant by the its common name is touch me not plant, touch me not, or its scientific name is Mimosa pudica. Okay, what's the scientific name of this plant? Mimosa pudica, or the common name is touch me not. As the name suggests, touch me not. See, you can see the leaves, how they're looking in the plant. But when you touch this plant, what happens immediately? The leaves start drooping. They just close. Okay. And once you remove your hands, again they come back to the same position. That means it's kind of reversible movement. Okay. Where the if no one is touching the leaves, they're completely open. But if someone touches the leaves, immediately the leaves droop. Okay. And again, once you remove your hand from the leaves, again they come back where the leaves are quite open. Now this movement towards the where the leaves are drooping because of your touch is known as thigmonasty. Okay. Movement of the stem towards light is phototropism. Movement of roots towards the soil is gravitropism. Movement of leaves to touch is called as thigmonasty. Okay. So here, not only human beings show response to stimulus, that means if there is any external change in the environment, we show some response. Just like I have given you two examples where uh, if your mother gives you a hot cup of water and accidentally you touch it, immediately you withdraw your hand. Or the second example that I have quoted here is where you were eating hot plate of noodles. First bite, you didn't know that it was hot plate. And next time when you eat, you just blow and be careful and then start eating the second bite, right? In the same way, not only human beings, even animals, plants also respond to stimulus. Where one example is the stem moving towards sunlight, roots moving towards the soil, or leaves drooping upon touch. This kind of response to stimulus is not shown by non-living things. For example, if I place a pebble or a rock in the fire, okay, will the pebble come back walking from the fire? Obviously, no. It won't show any response. For example, I'm sorry. For example, if you touched fire by chance, okay, then immediately what's your response? You come back. I mean, for example, there's a candle which is lit, and your hand was slightly near to the candle. You didn't focus on the candle, and suddenly you felt the heat. So what would you do? You immediately come away from the candle, right? But that's not the case with the pebble or any non-living object. They don't show any response to the stimulus. Stimulus means the change in the external or internal environment. Now, should we give credit to the scientist who first observed it? Obviously, right? Yes. So, who first actually discovered it? Ivan Pavlov. He first observed that living organisms, they respond to stimulus. Any change in the external or internal environment, living organisms, they do respond to it. Unlike non-living objects, non-living objects, they do not show any response even if there is a big fire, but still there's no such response shown by inanimate objects, whereas living organisms, they respond to it. And Ivan Pavlov, he is a Russian physiologist who first said that any living organism, they show response to external stimulus. We have another scientist by the name Jagadish Chandra Bose. What did he discover? Why was he given credit? He first said that even plants show response to stimuli. Not only human beings or animals, even plants, which are living things, they also exhibit response to external changes or internal changes in the environment. Is it clear? So, two scientists who have to be given credit for their discovery that living organisms show response to stimulus or even plants show response to stimulus are Ivan Pavlov and Jagdish Chandra Bose. Okay, now do you know why do we feel dizzy sometimes, or where you feel that you are about to fall? That's because we all know that we breathe in oxygen, right? And for example, out of the 100% oxygen that I breathe in, 20% of oxygen will be utilized by brain. Okay. And who brings this oxygen to brain? Blood. Blood brings the oxygen to the brain cells because brain is the controlling center. Brain should tell what all my cells in my body have, what function they have to perform. For this, brain needs should require energy, and therefore now basically out of 100% of oxygen that I breathe in, 20% of oxygen is basically utilized by brain. And who brings this oxygen to the brain? Blood cells. Now blood not only brings oxygen to the brain, along with it also brings glucose. Okay. And if the amount of glucose is normal, if it is proper along with oxygen amount, then brain functions normally. It has good amount of energy, so it tells the cells what function they have to perform. But if the amount of glucose that is being carried towards the brain is less, that's when you fall dizzy. Have you ever heard your teacher saying that in the morning it's very important for all of you to have your breakfast? Why? If you don't have your breakfast, then obviously there will be less amount of glucose levels in your body, as a result of which what happens, the amount of glucose that will be carried to the brain cells by the blood will be less, along with oxygen, as a result of which you start feeling dizzy. And maybe you might have observed the days when you don't have your breakfast, and if you have a long assembly, then there are chances that you might faint. Okay, so that's the reason it's quite important to have your breakfast, lunch, and even dinner on time, so that all the organs in the body can perform their function properly, where energy can be produced properly for their activities to be done. Okay, so that's the next difference. So the first difference that we discussed today between living and non-living organisms is they show the process of respiration. All living organisms respire. And second thing is they show response to stimulus. That means they respond to any change in the external and internal environment, unlike non-living organisms which just remain like a statue. Okay. Now let's understand the process of phototropism using an experiment. This can be done even at home. Okay. So for this, what actually you have to do is take a plant, a potted plant, put this potted plant in a cardboard. Okay. And this plant, which is covered inside a carton box, okay, not a cardboard, carton box. Okay, you have placed the potted plant in a carton box, and this plant, which is placed in the carton box, is kept in a very dark room. Okay, now what you do is so let the plant be in the dark room inside the carton box for around 2 days. Okay. Now later, after 2 days, what you do is make a hole in the carton box. Okay. And place a source of light. You can put bulb. Okay. Or else see that now the plant is placed slightly such that rays of sunlight can fall onto this hole. Okay, so again I'm explaining. Firstly, you take a potted plant, put it in a carton box, and place this potted plant inside the cotton, which is placed inside the carton box in a dark room. leave it for 2 days. Now you place a hole in the carton box, and one side make a small hole, okay, at the center of the carton box. Now allow light to pass through the hole. What you observe is you start finding that the stem of the plant eventually starts bending towards the light. Okay, so you can see that there is a change in the external environment which is being seen. Internally, sorry, initially the room was entirely dark. Now slowly you can see that there are rays of light which are falling, and stem starts moving towards the light rays. And this process where the stem is moving towards the light, it is called phototropism. Okay, so this is a simple experiment to understand what actually is phototropism. Or even you can try this experiment if you find mimosa pudica plants. Basically try touching them. As soon as you touch, the leaves starts drooping, and once you remove your hand, again the leaves come back to their original position. That's an example of thigmonasty, and this is an example of phototropism. But all these experiments or examples are to show that living organisms, they basically respond to any stimulus, any change in the external environment. Okay, now the third difference between living and non-living organisms is living organisms show the process of reproduction. What is reproduction? Process of producing younger ones of own kind. Okay, so let's understand. So basically human beings, they give rise to babies. You can see dogs give rise to puppies. Cow, it gives, it produces calves. Now, all these are of its own kind. We have never seen a human being giving birth to a puppy, or a dog giving birth to calf. No, that's not the case. When I say reproduction, it is a process where uh, younger ones of own kind are produced. Okay, so living organisms, they show this process of reproduction. And even we can see that snakes, lizards, birds, they also produce their, they also give birth to young ones. But first they lay eggs, and these eggs hatch to produce either the larvae, or to give rise to the animals. Now, viviparous and oviparous, what do these terms actually mean? Okay, try to understand. If living organisms, during the process of reproduction, when the living organisms give birth to young ones, then it is called viviparous. Human beings are viviparous. Dogs, viviparous. Cow, viviparous organism. Then when do you use the term oviparous? When the living organism lays eggs, and these eggs hatch later to give rise to the organism of its own kind, okay, of the same kind. Then you call it as oviparous. Like birds, they lay eggs. Snakes, lizards, fish, they lay eggs. And then the eggs hatch and give rise to the younger ones. Then they are said to be oviparous. But here, is egg production seen? No, they don't lay any eggs. Okay, so living organisms, they give birth to young ones, and since they give birth directly to the young ones, they're said to be viviparous. Whereas if an organism lays eggs during the process of reproduction, and these eggs hatch and give rise to the organism, then they are said to be oviparous. How to remember? Ova, ovum also means egg. What's the scientific term for egg? Ova. Hence, these are said to be oviparous because they produce eggs during the process of reproduction. Okay. What about plants? Do they lay eggs, or do they directly give rise to younger ones? No. Plants produce either seeds or they produce spores. Here, can you see? This is a plant by the name fern. It's a fern plant, and you can see some structures on its leaf. These are the spores. Okay. These spores, when they fall on the soil, then they germinate and give rise to a new plant. Okay, even seeds, we know, for example, if you just sow the seed, then obviously after 1 to 2 weeks you can see that the seed germinates, and slowly you can see that the plantlet develops. So living organisms like human beings, they give birth to younger ones. Animals, certain animals like cows, dogs, cats, deer, they give birth to young ones. Whereas certain animals like lizards, reptiles, most of your reptiles, birds, they lay eggs. Such organisms which lay eggs, they are said to be oviparous. Ova means egg, and that which give rise to young ones, birth to young ones directly, they are said to be viviparous. Okay. What about plants? They don't lay eggs, but instead they produce seeds or spores during reproduction. These seeds or spores, when they are grown in soil and when they are provided with suitable conditions, they germinate and give rise to plantlet. But have you seen a pen or a chalk undergoing the process of reproduction? From a chalk, will you get another chalk? That's not the case. So, another characteristic feature that is seen in living organisms is they reproduce. It's the process where they give birth to young ones or they lay eggs. Okay, so living organisms show the process of reproduction. Okay, now prog these younger ones that they produce, these are also called progeny. Okay, progeny or the term offspring can be used. Okay, progeny means children. Not only the term progeny is used for human beings, it can be used even for plants. Offspring also can be used for plants. Any so during the process of reproduction, what happens is the process where progeny or offspring are produced either by giving birth to young ones or by laying eggs, or in case of plants by producing seeds or spores. So any living organism shows the process of reproduction. It can be very simple reproduction. For example, if you remember amoeba, it's a single celled organism, right? In amoeba, what happens is, for example, this is your amoeba. What happens is just simply divides into two. Now each will act as an independent organism. There are two amoeba formed. Now again they divide to give you four amoeba where they act independently. So it can be as simple as that seen in amoeba to complex reproduction that you find in human beings, where for the development of the baby, it takes usually 9 months, right? So it's quite complex. So, but any living organism, they must show this process of reproduction. Okay. Next difference between living and non-living organism is lifespan. Okay. What actually is lifespan? When I say lifespan, what does that actually mean? It's nothing but the time period between birth and death. The time between your birth and between your death. That is your lifespan. Living organisms, they have a definite lifespan, unlike your non-living organisms. How to understand this? Let's take an example. Let's assume you took a plant. Okay. Let's assume you have taken a plant. Now place this plant in a dark room for around 60 days. Okay. You just took the potted plant, kept it in a room, you locked the room for 60 days. No one went inside the room to water the plant, or you didn't switch on the lights to give it a source of energy. Nothing of that sort. You just kept the potted plant in a room for 60 days and the room is locked. Okay. Now after 60 days, you go and see, obviously the leaves start wilting and eventually you can see that the plant would have died. Okay. So here you can see that initially the plant is living. You have placed it in a dark room, as a result of which, and since there was no nutrition for it, that means there was no water, it couldn't prepare its food, because plant can prepare its own food, but for the food for it to prepare its own food, we all know that it requires carbon dioxide, it requires water, it requires energy in the form of sun, and it should have chlorophyll pigment. When I locked the plant in the room, what actually happened? Chlorophyll pigment is there in the plants. Okay. Water, am I providing water for it? No. Is there sun or any bulb that I kept in the room? No. The room is completely left dark. So, can the plant perform photosynthesis to prepare its food? That's not possible. So, as a result of which, the plant died. And you can see that this is how the status of the plant would be after 60 days. But let's imagine you have kept a chair for 60 days in a room. It's completely locked, like the room is locked. No one went into the room. After 60 days, what would happen to the chair? Nothing. It would be the same, right? Maybe it would have been slightly dirty because of the dust that might have fell on the chair, but still the chair remains as it is, right? But what I'm trying to say is living organisms, they have a lifespan. They have, what is lifespan? It is the period or it's the time between birth and death. And it's not the same for all living organisms. Like for example, here you can see a housefly. Average lifespan of a housefly is 1 to 4 months. For a mouse, it's 2 to 3 years. For a horse, the lifespan is 25 to 30 years. That doesn't mean that every horse must survive for 25 years or for 30 years. If you're taking good care of the horse, providing it nourished food and allowing it to exercise, maybe it can live for 35 years. But usually average lifespan is 25 to 30 years. For an elephant, the lifespan is 70 to 90 years. And this is basically uh, redwood trees of California. These redwood trees of California, they have a very huge lifespan, which is around 2000 years. Man also can't survive, right? Human lifespan is average. Lifespan is around 70 to 80 years, human beings, right? But these redwood trees of California, they survive for around 2000 years. So basically, any living organism, they have a definite lifespan. It is the period from the birth to their death. Okay. Now, a simple experiment that you can try doing at home itself, take few peas or you can take pulses as well if you want, like the green gram, the red gram, bengal gram, any of the pulses. Now sow these pulses or the green gram in the soil at appropriate distances. Don't sow them too close, as then what happens, the plants grow closer and they can't develop properly. So at appropriate distances, sow the seeds, water them, wait for 2 to 3 days. You can see that slowly a structure starts rising or developing from the seed. So this structure that you find arising or developing from the seed, it's called radical. Okay, what is it called? Radical. This radical only later develops and gives rise to root in a plant. But initially, when the seed is present inside the plant and you water it properly and you provide sufficient amount of sunlight, that means there are all favorable conditions for the seed, then it starts germinating, where you can see a small structure developing. This initial structure that you find is called the radical, and during later stages of development, this radical that develops only gives rise to roots. Okay. And as the seed is germinating, you can see one more structure developing upwards. Radical grows towards the soil, and you have one more structure developing known as the plumule. The plumule gives rise to the shoot or the stem of the plantlet. Don't call this as plant, it's just a plantlet which has to develop still. So it's a plantlet, and you can see even the leaves are developing. Okay, so this process of development of the plantlet from the seed is known as germination. When does germination take place? Only when there are favorable conditions. What are the favorable conditions for the seed to germinate? It should have proper sunlight, air must be present so that it can take in carbon dioxide, and water must be provided properly to the seed. Only then germination occurs, wherein radical first develops, which gives rise to root, then plumule develops, that gives rise to the shoot, and later slowly leaves start developing, and then plantlet is formed. Once leaves form, they perform photosynthesis. Till then, who will provide nutrition for the seeds? Cotyledons. Okay. We all know that seeds have cotyledons. If it is a monocot, it has single cotyledon. If it is a dicot, it has two cotyledons. See here, is there any leaf development? No. There are no leaves formed still here. Then who is providing the food for the seed to germinate? It's the cotyledons. Okay. Once the leaves are formed, they can prepare their own food by process of photosynthesis, and that food is then transported from the leaves to the roots to the stem to various parts of the plant. Okay, so you can understand seed germination by a simple experiment where you can take the pulses, green gram, red gram, or peas, sow them in the soil and provide proper water and put the pot towards sunlight, and you can see that after 2 days you can see that sprouting is seen. That means germination takes place, and after a week or two, 1 or 2 weeks, you observe that plantlets start developing. So seed germination is observed. Okay, so basically, to, in today's class we learned that apart from presence of cell, presence of a cell in living organism, or growth, excretion, movement, and nutrition, we learned few more differences between an animate and inanimate objects. What are those? Any living organism shows the process of respiration. We understood the difference between respiration and breathing. Breathing is completely different from respiration. When I say breathing, it's just taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. But when I say respiration, what does that mean? It means the oxygen that you have taken in, that mixes with glucose, with the food that you eat, to give rise to carbon dioxide, water, and energy. What happens to the carbon dioxide? We exhale it out. Okay, that means we give it out. Exhalation. Oxygen is inhaled. We breathe in, right? What happens to the energy? It is used for various activities to be performed. What happens to the water? It is used for other reactions that should take place inside my cell. For that, it is utilized. So, we talked about respiration, we talked about reproduction, where any living organism they show the process of reproduction. If they reproduce by giving rise to young ones, then they are said to be viviparous. If they lay eggs, then we know egg means ovum. So hence they are said to be oviparous. But any living organism, they exhibit the process of reproduction. Some either produce seeds or spores like your plants. Okay. And we have talked about response to stimulus. Response is nothing but responding to the change in the external or internal environment. And lastly, we talked about lifespan, where any living organism has a definite lifespan, where it takes birth, lives for some time, and then it has to die. Okay, any living organism, they take birth and finally they die. This time period only you call it as lifespan. Unlike your non-living organisms, they do not have any definite lifespan. If you break the chair today, that's the end, right? Or if you don't touch the chair and lock it up in a room for several years, still it remains as it is. Okay, so that's it for today, students. If you have any doubts related to today's or even yesterday's class, you can comment it down below. And in today's class, we discussed few more differences between animate and inanimate objects. So on the whole, we discussed why we call a dog a living organism and a tab or a pen as a non-living organism. That's because of these various processes that are happening inside the cell of a living organism, and that's what makes it more special and unique, and makes us call it as a living or an animate object. Okay, So if you have any doubts, please do comment down below. And if you find my videos interesting, and if you understood the content in the video, please do like, share, subscribe my channel, Biology Foundation, and enjoy the process of learning. Bye bye. Have a good day.